Why don't state legislators make an issue of the politicization of state universities? Can anything be done to stir legislators to take some beneficial action on this issue? Would any of our panelists like to answer that question?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is obviously in 1971, the state legislature in Texas decided it would be a good idea for students to take an American history course. But I think one of the things you need to be aware of, if you were encouraging that to happen in other states, it's not something that can then lead to a guarantee of what it is that you want taught in the classrooms in terms of, at least what we found in Texas. And in fact, we have just asked for a modification in the law, and our suggestion is at least what we want to have done is that we're adding the words comprehensive survey before American history, and that bill actually was just introduced 2 days ago. But even that is not going to be a guarantee. I think where it goes down to is what some other folks on the panel have already addressed is, the legislature can only do so much. Eventually it comes down to institutional trustees taking some leadership roles to be able to push forward. So I don't think that you can get the be-all, end-all salvation from state legislative action. It's going to take more than that.
Okay, next question. What is the NAS strategy for getting their scholarship into the hands of parents? Good question. Ashley, do you want to take that one?
We're open to suggestions. That is a good question. We don't have a specifically targeted strategy for parents, but we do aim to get our studies disseminated as widely as possible. That Wall Street Journal article that Peter Berkowitz did about the California report got our study into the hands of a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have known about it. Even Rick Santorum read it and misquoted it, unfortunately. But again, we are open to suggestions.
I sort of had two observations about both questions. When our report came out on California in early April, I took a couple of copies over to our local assemblyman, Doug LaMalfa. His chief of staff was a former student of mine. And, I went over there and kind of talked up the report and asked him if this might be something that the Republican caucus in the assembly would be interested in. And Steve listened and nodded, very good, very interesting, very important. What did you find? Blah, blah, blah. He said, I'll get back to you on that. That sounds like a great idea to me. I never heard another word from him. And so I don't think that expecting legislators, especially in a super blue state like California, for example, where they have a super majority in the Senate and the Assembly, is likely to produce much good. However, my second observation was Academic Questions put out that recent issue on 100 good ideas about what to learn in college. I mean, I'm garbling it, but I wrote up a little piece for that, and I made a number of suggestions, and a couple of my suggestions were that every student, before their sophomore year was over, they should be required to read Epictetus and Jonathan Rauch's book on kindly inquisitors. And it appears in a modified form in Academic Questions, but in an attempt to reach parents, I trimmed it down and made it simple and sent it off to Parenting Magazine. And I sent it off to Redbook. And I sent it off to USA Weekend Magazine. I'm afraid none of them, accepted the bait. But my advice would be you've got to address, I suppose, the magazines that parents themselves are likely to read. And they're not going to read Academic Questions or the American Historical Review or things like that. So that's what we've also got to do. We've tried to do that, John Ellis and I guess the results are mixed, but that's worth trying.
If I could add just one more comment. I don't think we should completely preclude action at the state legislative level. I think there's a general feeling out there of you in the general public. It would be a good thing for students to know American history, and in basically advocating action at the state legislative level, although California doesn't fall in this category, the majority of legislatures at this moment in time are actually, red. So I would suggest that it's not a bad idea. My only suggestion would be if you're seeking American history being a requirement that should be at the college level, make sure you add a couple more words. Like a survey, a general survey, comprehensive and general survey, and maybe even if you could at the start end, covering issues of the founding period or something that basically gets at what you want. I do think actually we can at least get the word out by talking about it, and if anything else, let's say you don't pass it in some states, at least by having the debate or the discussion, you're getting it out, and parents and others will start saying, well, what do you mean? That you don't require American history where it's not being taught? I mean, these are the kinds of things I think we have to be out there and use this window of opportunity, which may go away. Who knows what the 2014 election will bring? But at least right now, we're in pretty good shape in a lot of legislatures, so it's time to raise some of these issues in a very careful way. It doesn't mean you don't want to say you're dictating the contents of curriculum, but the idea of requiring American history is not a radical idea.
Maybe something even to add for the entire conference. Higher education, I believe, is in a state of creative destructionism, to borrow from Joseph Schumpeter. The new technologies offer us enormous opportunities. And it may be that even more than acting with legislatures, the best way to change the system, to challenge the giant, is to create a better product at a fraction of the cost. The next question, which is one of my favorites. What college, university began the trend of abandoning any core curriculum, that is, moving to the open curriculum? Well, Brown certainly is conspicuous. I don't know if they were the first. Does anybody want to take on the question why we have elite colleges and universities in the United States moving to no curriculum, open curriculum?
Well, I'll take a crack at some of it. So it's a huge issue, obviously, and there are many things that are pouring together to make general education requirements seem like a bad idea. Two which spring to mind is that on the faculty side, American universities are producing PhD candidates with incredibly narrow research interests. And so to have to contribute to a general education would mean that they would have to be willing to forego their intellectual bread and butter. And they are often unwilling to do that in institutions like Bowdoin or other elite institutions. They go there so they can continue to pursue their research interests and also have some sort of vague interest in their students as well. A second issue is that the removal of general education requirements enables people from all sorts of backgrounds, whatever their education is in high school and whatever their achievements are. If you have a smorgasbord of courses, you make it easier for students to navigate away from the more difficult ones. And I would, because social justice has become a center of what these institutions are all about, a core curriculum and a general education requirements would very simply, in many cases, stop them from being able to achieve that social justice.
Yeah. Charles?
It occurred to me, back in the middle of January, I happened to be down in Los Angeles to attend the funeral of a very good friend's father. He was a very senior guy, 98, and after the funeral, we all repaired over to the UCLA faculty lounge, and there was a dinner and luncheon rather, and some talks, and I ended up seated between a very old friend from the political science department at UCLA and the current chairman of the political science department at UCLA. And my old friend said to me rather casually, why do I hear you associated with UDOF? What do you have to do with UDOF these days, or Sherry Lansing? And so I gave him, the 30-second briefing on what was going on. And the chair of the political science department told me about something that was coming on down the line. This was before UDOF resigned, less than a week later. He said that the University of California was very concerned about what foreign students, or non-resident students, but foreign students, what foreign students thought about the University of California undergraduate curriculum. And I said, why would that matter? He said, well, you have to understand that this is a very big money spinner in the future for the University of California, that right now I think about 9% of the students are foreign. They'd like to get that up to about 13 or 14%. And so to be competitive with other public institutions, they're very concerned about what foreign students think about the curriculum. And that, in turn, becomes a consideration in the hiring of faculty. What will you new faculty do to address the interest of foreign students in our curriculum? I decided to let that conversation drift, but that was something that at the administrative level at the University of California is of great concern, what other students from abroad think about the curriculum.
I can tell you how it happened at Hamilton College, having served there for 31 years. Hamilton had, as its pièce de résistance at one time, a mandatory interdisciplinary sophomore seminar course. When it was instituted, I twice warned the dean of the faculty that it would not work. Why? He said, will it not work? I said, because you're operating under the assumption that all your faculty have this great range of erudition. You will find that they will be very uncomfortable teaching such a course, the students will recognize it, and they will not like to take it. And I turned out to be prophetic. And then at a faculty meeting where they were debating what to do next after the collapse of the sophomore seminar, a bare quorum of the faculty, at a faculty meeting where there was a bare quorum, an unenthusiastic bare majority voted in the open curriculum. And then what has happened is what I call the forming of an iron triangle around the open curriculum. And the iron triangle is admissions, the Communications and Development Office, and then the administration. Why admissions? Admissions finds it sells even to the best high school students. How do they sell it? I pretended to be a parent one day going on campus tours. And the students were openly saying, hey, if you don't like math, come here. You don't have to take any math. And I kid you not, that's how it was being sold. Now, as the SAT scores of the admits rose at Hamilton College, obviously this made trustees and administrators happier. Our Communications and Development Office then found it had what it desperately wanted, the brand, okay? And so they began advertising Hamilton's unique curriculum. Now, Hamilton professes to be a national teacher and teaching, a national leader in teaching students how to write. I pointed out to the head of C&D that unique means one of a kind, and Hamilton was not the only place to have an open curriculum. So now it is branded as an unusual curriculum. So the iron triangle has formed, and there are faculty who recognize after a certain point in time, this is really not good for students. But now that that iron triangle is formed, what they focus on is advising. You know, there is a central contradiction between liberal arts and the open curriculum. And so they think they can paper over it by paying more attention to advising. And there was a big caucus just a few days ago at Hamilton where Vassar, Brown, and other representatives of open curricula school were powwowing how to improve the advising. The problem is, and I know this from advising dozens and dozens of students, once they come here, you know, because of the open curriculum, is that you will have difficulty persuading them to take a math course or a science course or an economics course. Hey, I came here. This was the open curriculum. I don't want to do it. You see? So, again, a great betrayal of the liberal arts education. Next question. Another one. Very interesting. One of my favorite guys. How did Howard Zinn become the dominant author of American history textbooks? Richard, do you want to deal with that one?
Well, he's actually not, but he is clearly used in a lot of cases. Actually, I think the only good thing about the study that we found is that nobody at University of Texas or Texas A&M ever used Howard Zinn alone. Okay, it was always paired with a traditional text. So that was actually one of the positive things he found in the study. I would say, unfortunately, if you moved out of a flagship institution and went to other institutions, you would find that Zinn is frequently used as the textbook, and for all the reasons once you have a pervasive. But there are also equally problematic textbooks, by the way, other than Zinn. Take a look at Gary Nash, take a look at a number of other folks out there. So, although Zinn is the one that a lot of people know. So, I would say it wasn't predominant in our study. It's probably more predominant in non-flagship institutions, and it's clearly out there, and he sold more copies, I guess, than anybody else in terms of a textbook. But in some ways, it's not even a textbook in the classic sense of the word, but it is a text that is used frequently in courses around the country.
I know it's used very frequently at Cal State and Chico for all the reasons you just said. I think students like it in general, Bob, because it kind of plays to a certain kind of postmodern sense of you can't fool me. I really know what happened in American history because I read Howard Zinn, and to some freshmen or sophomores, that's a very appealing kind of facet of the book.
One of the things that we talked about in the report, and this was kind of our attack, and this is we thought we took the position we praised those who used conflicting interpretation textbooks, and I think I figured the only approach we could take on this, but I do think there's some merit to it. We thought that people who were able to show and be willing to have in their classrooms conflicting points of view, that's sort of something that we would want our students to be engaged with, and I think that's a positive thing. So I think if Zinn, then also Schweikert or Paul Johnson.
But also. Sean Willents, just a couple of weeks ago, blasted Oliver Stone and his series in the New York Review. So I think there are also some critics of that kind of Zinn within the profession itself. Michael Walzer was always very critical of Howard Zinn and said that it just was erroneous, it was fallacious, it was misleading, it was bad history.
Well, being a parent and having gone to the local public high school to complain about the AP history teacher using Howard Zinn, I can tell you what is scary is if you go out here, I know Mary Graybar, who's here, has written on this subject, is how frequently Howard Zinn is used as a main text or a supplementary text in U.S. AP history courses in high schools. So. Now, this question, I saw Ann Neal a little bit earlier, must be from Ann. Are the trustees the solution, or are they a big part of the problem?
Well, Ann knows my position on that, because I've talked with her and so forth. Of course, in California, the Board of Regents are a problem. We've tried to show that they've abrogated their duty and responsibility. but I don't know what can be done about them. I mean, Sherry Lansing was appointed to the Board of Regents in 1999, and then after that she was fired from Paramount, and then when Arnold was governor, he reappointed her to the Board of Regents. So she's on the Board of Regents till 2021 or 22 or something like that. So if you look at the composition of the members of the Board of Regents in California, there's not a single one. We could not interest a single one to even talk to us about our report, which was directed to the Board of Regents. I mean, who else is on the Board of Regents is Richard Bloom, otherwise known as Mr. Dianne Feinstein. So, I mean, there really is a strong core of people on the Board of Regents who are likely to remain there, honestly, for the foreseeable future. Ward can address it himself, but because he was a member of the Board of Regents, that's a 12-year term. That's a long period of time.
Yeah. I'll just make one last comment. I think they are very important because I don't think you can expect the legislature, and in fact, I don't think we would want the legislature to dictate curriculum. So I think the trustees have an authority and a responsibility that's very important. But you need to have, of course, if you're talking about public institutions, obviously you need to have a governor or an appointing, whoever's the appointing authority, willing to have a systematic plan of what they were going to do. That was actually the case in Texas. But even there, we still have issues. I don't know if the trustees in Texas are willing to tackle what we found in our study.
The time is up for the first session. Let's give a nice round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all.